In a short stretch of time from the mid-90s to the early 2000s, a relatively small group of people started playing around with this thing called the World Wide Web. They had the audacity to think they just might change the world. This project introduces you to the OG players from those hallowed days and lets them tell you what it was like and how you should have been there. Episode 4. Today we're going to talk with Andy Hobsbawm and Eamonn Wilmott from online magic fame and agency.com fame. Ritesh, good to see you, sir. How are you?
Kyle, happy Friday. It's noon. It's Friday, so it must be you should have been there.
It must be you should have been there. And today we're going across the pond. I'm going to be the sole ugly American on the episode today.
Let me know if you want me to translate anything today for you, because
just to be clear, football is not the pointy thing, right? It's not the pointy ball.
Exactly. This is the one that you kick with the ball. That's why it's called football.
You can't use your hands. I don't like it. But anyway, we'll get to that. Before we dive in here, I've got a little bit of housekeeping. So if you're watching, if you want to see previous episodes, if you want to get links to the podcasts, if you want details about upcoming guests, like our first pair of guests, to kick off 2021 are going to be Craig and Jeff from Razorfish. So you can see all that sort of stuff over at You Should Have Been There.
No, you should have come. You should have.com. Come on.
You should have.com. Yeah, what it says on screen there.
There you go.
And, please leave comments. If you're watching the stream, leave comments. Ritesh can see those and we can put them on screen. We'll make you famous. And then the last thing, and this is because we're influencers now, we're going to ask you to subscribe. Particularly, go subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're up to 51. We need 100 before we can get our own URL.
It's so funny. We get like 200-300 views of the videos. For flip's sake, one of you. Subscribe.
Hit the subscribe button. I don't know.
Where's the love? Anyway.
Let's do this. Let's talk to
the magicians.
Gentlemen. Good day to you. Good day to you, sir. Good day.
Good morrow.
Well, actually, I think it's afternoon for you guys, right? Do you have a pint of ale in hand? It's 5 in the evening, I think, right? Well done.
Some tea.
A cup of tea in hand.
Cup of tea. Well done.
That's time has moved on.
The pub's still closed?
Well, they are. No, they're open again. I don't know. I don't go to pubs. So.
I think it depends on the tiers, right? I think Boris Johnson's come on with a whole bunch of tiers you have to be in or something.
Yeah, then there's now new tiers.
Yeah.
So new post-lockdown, pre-Brexit tier.
I love it.
It's a case study in great communication for me.
It's great to see you both. Eamonn, I got to say, your toupee, it looks amazing.
Hold on. Give it a sec. Okay. How's that? Better?
You have always had impressive hair, sir. I've got what I'm calling the COVID mullet, which is it's just.
And I've got the same thing, but there's no mullet. It's just a crazy Einstein thing going on here. So
I dream of having a COVID mullet, but
yeah, well, at some point, I
don't tease me.
It was darker when I kind of feel like if you guys sent some pictures, which we might show later, I kind of feel like this is just, the boy, did we have a lot of hair back then show.
And I think I weighed about 30-40 pounds less as well, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe the before and after show.
That would be excellent. So why don't we kick it off?
Why don't we kick it off? I was just going to say the same thing because I feel like there are so many stories to tell here. Like I want to jump right into it. Where I'd love to start is we know you from agency.com days, but you had a whole life before then and rock stardom and internet stardom, and you started online magic. So I'll leave it to you to figure out who's going to go first. You can sort of tussle it out like you always have. But I would just love to hear like how did it all begin for you guys? Like where did it start and what was all of that?
Andy, should we go age before beauty? Would that be probably best?
So you're going to go first then, are you, Eamonn?
Thank you. I'll make the jokes. You feel free to pile on. So I was living in San Diego about 1987.
That's a little too early. Yeah, we don't want to hear all that. Now go ahead.
It's about the internet. It's about the
Years ago when my parents first.
Yeah, exactly.
I was born.
No one told me it was going to be such a tough crowd today. So I'm publishing a magazine called Supercomputing Review. Notice I've moved into Cantor mode now, urging from the host.
Yeah.
Then about 1990, I went to a meeting with somebody and they gave me a business card. It had a squiggle on it. I said, man, what's that squiggle? And it was a .edu. He said, oh, yeah, well, it's a bunch of scientists and engineers and it's something called the internet. I was like, how many people are on this thing? He said, 10 million. So this is a real sort of history lesson. So, cut a long story short, which obviously I'm being asked to do here, we set up what was the world's first commercial internet service. It started up as an FTP, file transfer protocol service. It then moved, wait for it, this is probably too much for Andy. Andy tranquilizers required here. It then became an interactive email server.
Oh, wow.
So you got an email and then you put the numbers of the stories you want and they came back. And then some horrible commercial bastard decided to charge people for their stories to go out, which caused a massive furore. So the good news is
all on 9600 baud modems, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
right?
exactly, man. The whistle. Yeah. I still respond to that whistle if anyone wants to do it for me. So the good news about that story is that for the last 30 years, I've been dining out on the fact that I launched the world's first commercial internet service. The flip side of that, however, no one's actually come back, is of course, I'm still working. How dumb do you have to be? You're still working. I've got one word to end with to explain the reason I'm still working, and that word is resources.
Yeah.
Andy, over to you, sir.
Resources. That's a bit of a.
I know, right? Well, we could say horses for courses. There you are.
I was sort of in a sort of spectacularly unsuccessful 80s band, and then I ended up working for this publishing company, publishing computer journals, and I didn't really know anything about computers. And
was this the band that you're speaking of?
No, this band was one I started in New York when I was.
This is the New York one.
So this is pre-New York. This is your band before New York.
No, that is the New York band.
Ah, okay.
I see.
So this was
you had some decent fame in your 80s.
I failed in more than one band, so. But I ended up getting this job, and it was in a publishing company, and I learned about computers, and then I broke up with a girlfriend, went to Thailand to kind of moon parties and things like that, and came back, and Eamonn and his brother had sort of done a joint venture with the company, publishing an email newsletter. So this is post Eamonn's Supercomputing Review in San Diego, and he came back, and we kind of got on well, and then the web came along. Well, the web was sort of had been invented, but Mosaic was released.
Yep.
And at the end of '93, the guy who was doing the newsletter, the editor, just put up a website just for the hell of it because he knew some HTML. And that kind of blew my mind, really. Seeing this Unix box where you could watch people from all over the world interact with this content was just so clearly, I thought, world changing, and global real time interaction with media and all of that business. And did it hit you? Was it sort of like upon seeing it, you had that epiphany? Like, what was it that made you go, this changes things? Yeah, it was. It felt like a real moment of epiphany. Like, it was so obviously incredibly important that you could put up a piece of information, press a button, publish it, and people completely disparately all over the world could connect together through a network, interact with that content. It was, groundbreaking, really. And it was so obviously something that was going to, shift all kind of industries and various.
But you were both in the publishing business, right? Yeah, but you were both in the publishing business, and Eamonn, you had done the magazine, and then you saw this thing, and Andy, you came back from Thailand renewed and ready to rock and roll, and you were still going back into that publishing world. So I'm certain you probably both sat there and thought, hey, hang on a minute, this model of printing something, putting it out on newsstands, and all of that is going to shift if this kind of model starts to appear on the computer.
Quite early on, we because we were the only people doing it, we ended up sort of meeting some sort of remarkable foundation clients, and one of them was The Economist.
Wow.
Arguably the greatest publication in the world.
So Eamonn, when did you went from you invented the internet, then Andy discovered it, and then when did you actually create Online Magic?
We consummated the relationship in Soho Square, which we're happy to reenact if we've got time today. But if not,
maybe at the end.
Yeah, we'll have time for that.
You'll let me know. So it was called Internet Publishing then. And just a sort of quick aside, because Chan told a story on this that made me laugh in his brilliant update. And I had a similar one with IBM. Well, I went to see IBM at the South Bank in London here. And as we're getting into the lift, this guy said, I love what you guys have done with the internet, absolutely fantastic, And what do? Do you tell the guy, actually, you're an idiot? You're not bad. Or you just do the opposite, which is, we're doing our best. It's obviously a big opportunity. So we ended up sort of meeting an amazing amount of people very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And there was a big moment in terms of our sort of evolution as a company where we went to see The Economist with the most lovely people you've ever met. We were up in the boardroom. They'd made us some lunch, and it was all very, very pleasant, chatting away. And then Jonathan Church, who was sort of the nicest man in the world, sort of leant across. He said, "No, Eamonn, we've got one question for you. Are you a publisher or are you a service provider?" So there's a big moment, and we were like, "What would you like us to be?" Actually, that massively changed our lives, didn't it? Because we had to kind of jump, and we were doing.
You were both there. You both went to see The Economist together, and this is sort of the
we were actually publishing PowerPC News, and we were doing some other things that were actual publications. Yeah, and it was actually one of the easiest decisions to make.
So when was this? What year was this, Eamonn? Andy?
This would be 94, I think, Andy, but your memory is, because of your Cold War swimming, sort of our best hope.
Well, I think because I'd gone to New York by this time, so I think we decided, I think the publishing company was opening an office in New York. So I think I said to Eamonn, why don't I felt like getting out of the country. Why don't I go over there? So I had President North America on my business card that I could show my mum. And there were like 3 of them.
That's
and I think it was around that time where we were talking to The Economist, but we hadn't consummated the deal yet.
Yeah.
And the guy who was advising them in New York came and said to me, do you guys build websites? And we were a publishing company then. We were doing this e-zine and on a website. And I said, yeah, of course. And then talked to Eamonn and said, yeah, we can do that, can't we? And he introduced us to a company called GT Interactive Software, who did publish Doom and Quake and all of those.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. They became this kind of, multi-million client for us and a real anchor client. And, I remember that was the time we transitioned out of the publishing, sold our shares back to the publishing company. And then Eamonn did a deal to form Online Magic with DDB in London.
I didn't realize it was
Carl, before we go any further, we just got to sort of acknowledge that moment of course we can.
Yes. Yeah.
Pretty much our catchphrase for the first 3 years.
It's like the kind of what would you like us to be answer, isn't it? It's kind of like, do you do this? Yeah.
Sure we can.
Yeah. Hey, gentlemen.
Hang on, Kyle. Hang on 1 second, Kyle.
We have someone is challenging Eamonn your claims here. I don't know what you want to say to Mr. Su.
I had a good run. I had 30 years, and it's going to come to an end anyway. And if it was going to come to an end with anyone, man, my brother Chan Su, I'd pass on the baton.
Excellent.
Arguments for me. As always, can I just say, Chan, if you are listening, which hopefully you are.
He is.
Remember that something for me? Your word was absolute gold, man, and I never pushed back on it.
Wow. Amazing.
Boys, I think you can both have invented the internet. I
think we could give them equal credit. And
they co-created it.
Invent the internet. It's fine.
So Andy,
Tim Larkham says, hold on, Carl. Tim Larkham says hello. Tim Larkham. Remember Tim? Hey, Tim.
Hey, Tim. How are you?
Amazing.
So, Andy, question for you. You moved to New York fairly early. I mean, did you think that this was going to grow big? Did you want to grow this big? Did you have ambitions for global domination early?
Carl, before he answers, can I just say he has paid off all those debts?
I do actually remember. I did have a. Oh, it's just a totally random thing. I remember. Anyway, no, actually, I won't say. It's so random. It's not really going to be interesting to anyone. But I was just rolling with it. I think because I'd broken up this relationship, and I'd sort of wanted to just go to another country, and I wasn't really thinking of much other than just experiencing life in another country. And then it suddenly, you remember, as you described, obviously with agency, far more so because you were based in New York.
Yeah.
Me, I was kind of like a satellite, but it was just a kind of rocket ship that suddenly went up.
Yeah.
And from what seems like from one moment to the next, you could not have enough capacity to service people who wanted a website.
Yeah. The first, I don't know, for us, you guys joined a bit later, but the first probably 2 years, it was literally just trying to keep up with it. And
I remember the pitch to GT Interactive Software. Well, I took a CRT monitor in the cab. I think you guys, you said you did that for a pitch as well. So I took all this equipment there, and the pitch was literally about 3 minutes long because we walked into the CEO's office and he was really busy, and he went to the CMO. So we should do this, right? Okay, fine.
Yeah,
that was it.
Yeah, that was good. Well,
we need a website, don't we? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Let's shift gears a bit. So when our two companies came together, that was kind of this momentous thing. It was really exciting for us, and we entered into a new phase where
hang on, Kyle. I think maybe what I'd love to hear, because you went from GT, so DDB comes along. How did DDB come along to create Online Magic? Because that's the bit.
They invested £500,000 into us, and it was obviously the greatest investment they ever made in their lives. And it also enabled us to inherit companies like Boots and other that they had as well. So money, and we had clients coming in there. So that was obviously significant because we ended up all being part of that same family.
So then you're in there, you're working away. Andy's conquering New York. You're in London, I'm assuming, Eamonn, right? How the heck did you meet these two reprobates, Shannon and Sue? What the heck happened there?
Well, actually, there's a couple of things about that. Firstly, obviously, it was a fantastic meeting of minds, enthusiasm, passion, direction, generally so. And there was, and I've been interested, Andy and I haven't maybe talked about this as much as we could have done over the years, but I thought it was a really interesting dynamic between there was Andy and Kyle and me and Chan. Mm-hmm. And there was that kind of, we were like these two sets of twins and different things, but doing them together. And then plugging that together was this feeling of like, wow. And the fact that, without question, Online Magic as it was then was miles the best company in Europe. And I say that, and I'm sure someone will log on right now and say no.
Well, actually, Ruth has logged on, and she not only says hi, there you go, but Tim Larkin may challenge that, I think, because he was in Europe.
Yeah, well, next week they might challenge it with all the Razorfish guys. But so, and we had an awareness clearly that Age.com were, the best company in America. And so we started coming together was really powerful. And I think personally, and I'm just not just saying this because I know he's watching, but personally, the kinship with Chan was immediate and is completely undiminished. So we had dinner last year, and within about 0.4 milliseconds, it was just my old mate Chan away, bang, straight back to it. And that was from the very first time we met. And I'm sure it will last forever. So we're very, very fortunate to have that level of connection. But I'll now pass to Andy, who can rebut.
Well, I'm hardly going to rebut. I do remember actually first meeting with you and Chan, and I couldn't actually work out Chan. It was like really obvious. Kyle was, you were who you were, and Chan. It took me a while to try and kind of tune into each sort of. I guess was just harder to read, so it took me a while to get to know him, which is obviously.
I think Ruth is still trying to figure this out.
Let's quickly do the dinner story. When we went out for the first time with the Angel.com team in New York, so we're a lot of courting going on in this call, but the courting was getting quite close to sort of a deal getting done. So myself and Andy went out with the top team at Angel.com. and there was some big steak and cigar restaurant, and me and we're like this kind of sort of white bread sort of UK guys turning around, and for some reason, them being polite, but very unlike the Americans, they let us order first, right? So there was I ordered, and it was like I had tuna or something like that, and Andy had sort of like tagliatelle or something like that, and it went steak, 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 steak. And me and Andy on the way out went. It was pretty clear who was on the menu. We were like, wow, man. We just got served. I mean, so that was a brilliant classic first meeting.
That was great. And it's funny, you're thinking these guys, because you had accents, we're like, oh, this is so exotic. These guys are, and it was clear that you were very much the players in Europe. I just remember being really excited. And I do remember, Andy, you and I just, bonding and talking creative and hand waving and things like that. And that seemed pretty immediate. So that was some pretty exciting times.
I think it was sort of driven by, because obviously Omnicom did a bit of matchmaking, along the way in lots of different stages. But I think it was driven by BA, because you guys had won British Airways and you needed to service it out of London. So then suddenly, merging with or partnering, acquiring became part of a sort of a mandate you had to figure out. So I think that was the backdrop to it. And obviously for us, I remember in London, it was really exciting to get to work on British Airways. Was a huge part of why the whole deal made sense. I think for me in New York, it was also reinforcements, because I remember feeling like surrounded by these giant skyscrapers, and it was initially when I was on my own, I used to just like pull 56-hour stretches working, just trying to keep up with everything and deal, and all my resources came from London, until eventually I sort of kept tempting half the office over to work in New York, and hired some brilliant people in New York, like John Caruso and Ian Mignani, you may remember. And the team grew, and it was brilliant. But it was great.
Wait. You just said Ian Mignani was part of your team early on?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that whole crew.
Oh, so wait, Mignani, Caruso,
John Dutton.
Really?
Wow. Lots of people who then came over, when we merged fully in 98, I think.
Yeah. So, it's fascinating to me. Oh, look at this. There you go. Where's this? Can you remember who could tell us where this is?
Do you know what? Tony said something on LinkedIn about exactly where it was. Some
really?
Street, but I can't remember.
Yeah. So how many were you in New York by then when the merger happened, Andy?
I think we were about maybe as much as 30 in New York, 60 in London, something like that. Mm-hmm. Because we did it in two phases. So you did an investment in like 97, and then we did a full consummation in 98. So yeah.
And the work must have changed a bit since that occurred, right? So now, but it's fascinating to me, like you said, the kinship. You and Kyle, Eamonn and Chan. How did the cultures come together? That was the most interesting thing, I think. Putting those cultures together, because they had this, we can get it done. And it sounds like, Eamonn, you guys are the same thing. We'll figure it out. Let's go do it, right? Yes, we can.
Yeah,
is that the same thing?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say that the cultures never really came together. I think they agreed to have separate houses and visitation rights. That's how I would describe it, and everyone made it work. You know what? Even at the time, I had a sense that was the right thing to do. And if I look back on it now, I think it's the right thing to do, because you can't really homogenize that stuff without kind of ending up with the worst of both worlds. I think we actually did a pretty good job. And and with the European offices as well, that were unbelievably different to London, never mind New York and the rest of the US. I think having that sort of individual culture was a positive.
Mm-hmm. It was different in New York, when in 98 I then left to come back to the UK, which I was feeling like doing anyway. And we had our creative director in London, who was my best friend, and he had died, and I just felt I really wanted to go back. And so the New York office then merged fully with agency.
Gotcha.
That was different, but the London office then became agency.com, but it was always somewhat separate because it had its own physical identity, and it sort of operated obviously as part of the group, but it very much as the base, the HQ of Europe. So,
yeah, but just to say, Ritesh, we had Scott Guslin come over from, I think, the Colorado office, and obviously
good. That office with the ski lift. That's right.
Scott would be one of my favorite people on the planet, and he came over and engaged this sort of the UK team in an unbelievably good way. Again, keeping the brilliance of it, but bringing in a sort of another layer to it. So I think we did that quite well as a company. That would be my truth on it.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same. I think, as we started growing here in the US, Boston was a little different because they were very technology. It was the old Eagle River, and they were very big into the back-end software. Woodbridge was very, very technical. So they had a different, I remember trying to put some creatives in there early on, Carl. Remember people like, where are you sending me? It's where? New Jersey? That sort of thing. And then Chicago was completely different, very CPG oriented, So yes, they had their own cultures, I think. San Francisco was different as well. So you're right. But that was the beauty of it. But, we were in New York, so we felt the core of it, I guess. And London must have been about the same because those were the two original hubs, if you wish, right?
Yeah. Well, and the European integration, like you said, Eamonn, that was, I remember, Tim Larkin was in Visionic in Denmark, and they were a completely different, interactive TV company. And it was, it was different sort of technology set as well, different kind of culture, different culturally because of the country cultures.
As well. Just say, in case of some miracle they ever get to see this, absolutely amazing people. Love them.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
People.
Yeah.
And if there is a story that we're going to agree on, it's the fact that we were brought together on this journey by an amazing, just fantastic people from all over the world. To
I remember meeting Tim Larkin for the first time, him and Dan Sellers, and they were showing me that roller coaster thing they'd built, with the remote, and it's like, wow, that's amazing. And we're still struggling with it today, right? TV companies are still struggling with how do we make that remote into some sort of keyboard. So it's fascinating. Sorry, Kyle, go on, carry on.
No, I was just going to say, I felt like every one of those companies that became part of the thing, they all had great pride. And because we were all sort of creating things from the ground up, I think everyone had great pride. Andy had great pride in what they put together on the creative side there. I did as well. And I think it was how do we create bridges across those things, but still let all that stuff thrive? I remembered I've got right here, I don't know if you guys remember this. We did the Great Manager Program. We brought in, who was it? Nielsen. To analyze, I think it was the top 150 managers or top 146 managers. And we were supposed to get our numbers back. Like, here's your strengths and weaknesses, basically. And we didn't get our numbers back. And then, a week later, they came back to us and said, we had to run the numbers a second time because they said it was statistically remarkable how uniform the strengths and weaknesses were across your management team. What it basically said was where you were good, you were very, very good. And where you were bad, it was abysmal, right?
Fall apart.
And then, we tried to bring in Eagle River, which was very project management heavy, but not creative heavy. And the culture clashes were crazy, but we always worked actively to try to work on the culture things. But I think that original sort of the pride of what each of those companies had created was always there.
I think it was Gallup, wasn't it? That was it that company Gallup who did that survey for us?
Gallup, I think it was Gallup. Yeah. I thought Nielsen, but Gallup, I think it was Gallup. Yeah.
So let's go back to now. You're back, Andy. You're in London. You're with Eamonn. Things are starting to gel. Things are happening. What were some of the things that you guys were working on that were sort of, whoa, I can't believe we did that? I guess some of the European expansion must be in that list, right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember working on a thing with London, actually, before I came back, which was the general election site, which is something still very proud of to this day. And this was Michael Martin, who's the creative director, and he was super interested in politics and media, and he was very interested in events as a kind of very interesting way of, producing interactive content. So they have a kind of a time-based linear kind of narrative, but then you have this limitless depth that you can go to with the content. And this was really probably the best general election site in the UK, and it was remarked on. It was better than what the BBC did. We partnered with The Economist, and it was just a moment in time where I think it really made its mark. And the FT called it a watershed for the web, and it's been in museums and stuff. And so we worked on it with.
Weren't you pulling in real-time information in it as well? Weren't you doing some interesting technical things?
Yeah. We partnered with a whole load of people, so we were pulling in real-time data as well as kind of just publishing stuff. So we had a whole load of different partners for content and feeds, and it was one of the first times you had these kind of interactive voting applications where you said what policies you agreed with, and then it told you who you in fact supported.
Yeah.
Simple bits of interaction that made a big difference, and hugely informed people much more than they were before. So.
And that left hand now, it's amazing. All the different links. I'm just looking at that left hand now, going, whoa.
I remember actually, John Dutton, we sort of designed it, and we were in New York, and I remember we discussed. He sort of thought, well, you may as well use the convention of the time, which was Amazon. Don't do something crazy. Just do something where everybody's used to left hand navigation, content in the sort of right hand two columns, and. It was
amazing,
incredibly well, and people were still there for like a couple of years afterwards. We kept the site up, and people were still in the forums, arguing about everything from sliced bread to whatever the issue of the day was. So
amazing.
Eamonn, how about for you?
Well, my favourite story probably goes back a bit further than that. It was really, really early days when I was in my sort of jail cell, my office that was 3 foot by 8 foot on my own. Really early days, and I was on the football team of the company that was sort of hosting an office run. And I'm on the phone one day, and I hate to say this now, slightly embarrassed. I was a bit of a Manchester United fan at the time. I was a big fan of I'm sorry, so I've grown out, but don't worry.
And there's nothing to be proud of these days, Ritesh, as we know. But anyway, at the time.
I'm on the phone, and one of the guys that just walks around and says, Manchester United are on the phone. And I was like, I'm on a sales call, give me a second. He looked at me, and he didn't work for, it was only me, so he didn't work for my company at all. So he went, no, really, Manchester United on the phone. And I just caught that glimpse in his eye. I said, I'll call you back. Taking the call, and basically Manchester United had hired some intern who'd done a little bit of research and found out we'd done something. And we were kind of an embryo of a company at the time. Mm-hmm. And they weren't calling for us to give a quote. They were calling for us to build their website.
Wow. Yeah.
Amazing.
So train up to Manchester. We go and see them. And of course, we know that by the time we get there, we're sort of multinational in our heads and sort of spinning. and we had been working, we're just starting to work for Sky Sports. And the amazing thing, I was in this meeting with these guys, really crunchy, horrible commercials, if they're watching, sorry guys, but they were commercial beasts, right? And they didn't want to pay for the website. They wanted us to do it and we could commercialize it. So of course I'm in jackpot city. I'm like, well, I think we can do that under circumstances. I'm like the happiest guy in the world, right? I've gone off and I've spent about 73 hours on the phone, and we've got fortunes coming in sponsorship links, new business coming in, just off the charts, right? So I then get a call from one of Murdoch's henchmen from Sky, who we just started working with, asked me to come for a meeting. I've walked in there. We understand you're having some conversation with Manchester United. I was like, yes, absolutely fantastic. And actually, one of the things we put together is that they're happy to have a link to the Sky Sports site for you that we're building. So obviously, great synergy there. They go like, yeah, we wouldn't be supporting you building the site for Manchester United. At that moment, I was like, do I go forward? Do I go back?
Yeah, totally back. Yeah.
Guy had nothing in his eyes, man. He was like dead. There was nothing going on with the guy. I was just about to sort of try and do a bit of a dance. And he said, and then he went, we've been in touch with our solicitors, and we feel strongly you would be breaching. And he went through our agreement, your agreement, their agreement. So, bang, they took it over. But anyway, I don't want to sort of be negative. So we did finish with a nice one. We did launch the site. We then go to Manchester United for the big sort of launch on TV. My favourite player at the time by a million miles was Eric Cantona. Cantona's there, and it's the only time in my whole life I've ever seen a woman swoon. Big old sweater, and they said, Eric, the film guy, Eric, do you mind putting on a shirt, a Man United shirt? He pops off his top, and this girl, I've never seen it before or since, she went, oh. A little bit of a wobble. And like, Eamonn, go and talk to him, go tell him about the site. He can put his poetry on this. I've gone up there, completely embarrassed myself. I was literally the fanboy. But there's a happy Man United story.
Ooh, Cantona. All right, there you go. Amazing, absolutely amazing. Other new innovative. The Tim Larkham, by the way, says he remembers you visiting Andy at Copenhagen. How did that come around? Why did you think interactive TV, and what was the rationale behind Visionic?
Well, we had this. I remember we had this kind of vision in London of something we rather sadly called one engine, many channels, which
I remember that
nobody understood. And so whenever we tried to sell it, people just went, "Oh, right, you don't do websites then? Fine."
You're like, no.
It was sort of the idea of kind of omni-channel, however many years ago, and the idea you'd have one set of systems that supported different contextual sort of experiences on. And so interactive TV, Alex Wright, who was sort of creative director at the time, and he was really bought into the idea that TV was going to be an incredibly important channel. And so we looked for who the best people were, and Visionic were like head and shoulders above anyone else. And there was like a big company that I think eventually acquired them, NDS, but which was part of Sky, as I recall. Yeah, I went to see them, and they were, as Eamonn said, they were just absolutely lovely people doing fantastic work. And yeah, I don't feel we ever made the most of them at all. And their technology, I think, was we didn't really know how to integrate it with the rest of what we did. So
yeah. Tim just said interactive TV became Netflix.
Yeah, there you go.
He also apparently still has confidence in you, Andy, because he also asked, can you do anything about Brexit there, buddy?
Yeah, I can.
Can you whip up a website or something,
in my head.
Yeah. So now you're part of this whole thing. The agency's going, it's 98.
I do remember one other thing just from much earlier, when one of the things that we did, which was we had the first real-time credit card verification in Europe, because Eamonn had run into somebody at a conference from NatWest, and who'd sort of said, yeah, I think we could do that. So we had some modem dial-up connection to NatWest's real-time credit card verification. And so when I was in New York, I sold a site at the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference for like 95 or something. So the Apple WWDC 95, we built the e-commerce for. And so we were doing the e-commerce for the tickets. And then it went down. And I was getting all these calls, and ticket sales had stopped. And it turned out that a cleaner had literally unplugged the modem in the London office when she so that was the Apple WWDC e-commerce went down.
That's as good as the web server under somebody's desk and TapeNet in New York, right?
Version of TapeNet, isn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly. Well,
NatWest at a state saying they are not involved in any way in any e-commerce. So
wait, say that again.
So I'm just saying, around that, we had this real-time sort of thing. Real-time, it was a modem dial, but it was processing payments. But at the same time of that, NatWest head office was denying they were involved in e-commerce at any stage.
Oh,
perfect sort of madness of the early days.
Wow, that's crazy. I want to show one other thing, Andy, just if for no other reason than your hair. But
look at that.
This was you did the Tyson Hollyfield website. Like, I want you to talk about that, but also I want to take in like the sort of mid to late 90s computer setup there with the little computer speaker, the giant mouse and the CRT. But talk about that site.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was John Caruso who sort of was a smoker, and he met another smoker from Showtime outside this Omnicom building we had offices in. And they just got chatting, and next thing we know, we were doing the Tyson Holyfield fight sites. And it was great.
Yeah, That's great. Well, so what I'd like to do, I want to shift gears. So we collectively experienced, what on the outside seems, super sexy and amazing and incredible, and to some degree it was, which is, taking a company public. So normally in this last section of the show, we kind of talk about what have you done since agency.com, but I figure, you guys were very much at the center of this. So I would love to just kind of hear from you guys talking about leading up to going IPO when we were just, growing like crazy. And then, you have this moment that everyone, can point to, and then there's sort of life after. So I would love to just hear from you, what your thoughts are on sort of pre and post.
And let me frame that a little bit, because in New York at that time, the craziness of the market was amazing, So Kyle comes up with wacky idea week after week and would run into people and say, we should do this and we should do that. And one of those was, we should hire 30 people in 30 days. How hard could it be? Right. So, did any of that kind of stuff happen in London? Because I'd love to hear about it, because we thought we were the only ones suffering under Kyle's, fascist movements that he was with.
In London, by then they sort of kicked me up to chairman. I had to come and do the welcome, and there were 27 new employees on a Monday morning. And I remember thinking, this is going to be tough to sort of integrate. And they were all fresh-faced and lovely and beautiful people. And you thought, wow. It was kind of like fresh blood going in. You're like in Band of Brothers, the brilliant TV series when the new kids thinking, the problem we've got is that we're like 7 people down, sorry to say this, on the BA team. Like, you just ain't getting trained, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Welcome.
And you're going to be billable, you know what I mean? So it was that was kind of madness. But to your question, kind of about the IPO, I have a very, very powerful memory of when the roadshow completed and we had to go up to that 40th floor, and there was a ridiculous board table, and they were all there. All the horrible kind of analysts were there to try and dissect us, And it's the only time in my career that I've ever got onto a lift and got off. So we got there, and it was going to be the big pitch. And I've got onto the lift, and I thought, whoa, I'm not ready. I had to get off, do a bit of a, come on, son. Because the moment we've got to get in there, right? So we go up there, and it literally was a bad movie. It was just the maddest scene. There must have been like 30 analysts all sitting there, glasses, all sitting there. And remember, but we've done a lot of rehearsal. We've done it really well. And at the last minute, we decided that I would introduce Kevin Rowe as head of America, and he would introduce me as head of Europe. So fine, it was kind of off script, but we're going to do it. So I start off, and I'm introducing him, and he's got 2 degrees, one of which is in jet propulsion, right? So I went to the room. So actually, this guy is a rocket scientist. But you see, Carl just laughed politely. Room was like, not an absolute word, right? Wow. Now, I'm thinking, now he's going to introduce me next, and this is where you might need to do some translating research, because I left school at 15. I got 5 O levels. So if you could explain maybe to our American colleagues,
so
how that sort of fits in with like
to jet propulsion.
How deeply uneducated that is. You'll have to translate it, I think.
Yeah, so I would suggest that would be the high school dropout, making it big. By the way, Eamonn, I left school at 15 as well, but I only got 1 O level, and that was in music.
There you go, son. Perfect, man. I always knew we had that brotherhood, man. So,
yes, there you are. So the high school dropout is now introducing the guy with 2 degrees, one of which is in jet propulsion.
Exactly. So then
it's one of these advisors, right?
Which is over there, and Kevin's up next. So he firstly makes a joke about my hair. So let's just do a quick picture there, Carl. Could you just ping up explain why this would have been, and just imagine the culture shock right now of these horrible bastard analysts from Goldman, Solomon Smith Barney, all with their kind of $300. So there's me. Okay, jackpot. So, like he's just out of West Point, right? But then he has to introduce me, right? So it says on the screen, I've got my 5 O levels. That was all we could come up with. I didn't say that I'd spent the last 2 years of my 15th year playing poker and poker dice. You know what I mean? So we've left that bit out, right? So there was a magic moment, one of those moments you dream of, where Kevin, completely unscripted, goes, "Wow, I thought I was well educated, but this guy's got 50 levels of education." He's misread it in a moment of utter genius. But the room went like this. We're both standing up to do the presentation. I thought, what do I do? I went.
Brilliant.
Just waved to the room. So the thing about it was that we were on. It was one of the most magnificent presentations I've ever been part of. We absolutely blew the room away. We were on script, nailed it.
Brilliant.
And one of the final questions with this horrible little bastard, I remember he was like 3 down, and he said, "Yeah, I'd like to ask Eamonn about Europe. Sounds like you're doing a bit of a roll up in Europe. You're doing all these last minute acquisitions." And I thought, I'll take that. And I've started to give him a kind of impromptu A-team chat. And I remember looking across at Chan, and Chan's like, he's going off script. You know what I mean? Not good. But basically, what I said was, it was the best of the best. We had the best of the best. Yeah. In many ways, it doubled up in every position. And that magic of coming together was really fantastic.
Yeah.
And for me, when I look at the IPO, and if we were doing a movie, we should just end there.
Yeah.
End credits. And then on the bottom of the screen, it says, 4 days later, Chan Su decided to pull the IPO at $11. Next, 2 days later, Chan Su decided we'd go out at $22. Next screen, opening price $70.
Yep.
90, etc., etc.
It closed at 98 on day one. I remember that.
Yeah.
My mind is, not keeping that number. The reason being, Ritesh, it's too fucking painful. So I had to. And then maybe the final scene is Scott Guslin walking into the London pub on Crinan Street. And as he walked in that night of the IPO, the whole pub was going, "Scott, Scott."
Wow.
A moment, you know what I mean? So
amazing.
That was probably
amazing.
That would be the kind of high watermark. But I'll let you guys add your own version.
Well, Andy, what was it like the sort of that growth period leading up to that, or what are your memories from that time?
Yeah, I just remember it being absolutely manic, and you would just be having all of these meetings because everybody wanted to meet, and you'd be pitching and winning pitches just by virtue of the fact you could credibly put together a proposal for doing what they thought they wanted to do and explain it. So we had too much business, not enough people. There was kind of churn started happening. And then we all had all of these new demands to try and structure ourselves differently, in the lead up to and post IPO. But it definitely became less fun, didn't it? Because suddenly this freewheeling spirit became as much of a curse as a blessing. In the early days, it was like part of the juice that made it all run. And then post IPO, it was suddenly not really quite good enough. So we were constantly thinking, how do we tighten up? And at the same time, this growth story. And then I remember that I was insulated from it slightly by my brother Eamonn here, but I remember the story coming down from Anne and Eamonn that actually analysts, now they want growth, now they want retention, now they want, all these different metrics. So we were slightly adapting and pivoting to try and, foreground the thing that the analysts wanted to value us on.
Yeah, that was for me the biggest thing. And that was where the post-IPO thing, the real lesson I got there was we essentially had 2 weeks out of every quarter where we could run the business, right? Because, for a month, you're preparing for the next call. And then for 2 weeks, you're sort of licking your wounds after it. Then you kind of have, a couple of weeks in there where you can actually run things. But yeah, the analysts, I remember a number of quarters in a row, if our performance was good, our stock price went down, and if our performance was bad, our stock price went up. Well, we were just part of this large sea where our individual performance didn't matter, but it was very distracting. And yeah, that post-IPO thing, it definitely changed it just changed everything, right? Eamonn, what was your experience in that time?
Well, before Eamonn goes there, I think one of the things we should hear about is what Chan has just asked to maybe recollect from Andy's Marxist father, apparently.
Oh, that he had to repay a
loan. Is it? Did you owe him some pocket money or something? Is that?
No. Well, I still have the napkin. I did a deal with the head of this publishing company where I met Eamonn. And when I saw the website go up and I had that moment of epiphany, Eamonn and I were getting on and we agreed to be partners. So I bought into the company and I bought 10% of internet publishing for £10,000, which I borrowed off my dad using his credit card. And
did he know that you borrowed it?
Yeah, oh yeah, no. good clarification, but yeah. That obviously ended up being able to sort of repay him.
Amazing.
Hugely multifold with the IPO and everything. And I was very proud of that. So yeah, and I suppose what did he do with it? He probably gave it all away, I guess, being a Marxist. Maybe. I can't remember.
Love it. So I derailed you a little bit on the IPO, Andy. So Eamonn's swanning away with the highfalutin brokers and bankers in New York, and you're stuck in an office in London.
So I think Kevin Rowe even said something to you about when you were preparing for the IPO, and sort of Chan was asking Kevin and Eamonn and all these people to sort of get these materials together, and Kevin was beavering away and sort of giving his consulting A game. And Eamonn was kind of emailing me and Oriana and a couple of other people just saying, I need this, I need this, I need this. So we had a whole work team in London just flying out documents to Eamonn. I think Kevin said to you at one point, he was like, how are you doing this? Because Eamonn was sitting there drinking coffee and all his work was just appearing.
I think what's important there, Andy, is that absolutely sums up my career right there.
It's probably one of the major things I learned from working with Eamonn is the art of delegation.
Yeah, that's a
magical superpower to acquire.
So, guys, look, we've got about 5 or 8 minutes. Maybe each of you, where are you now? I mean, what an amazing journey! Creating something exciting, selling it, going public, seeing the stock go to 3, and then whatever. Eamonn, what are you up to now? What's going on? What are you still drinking coffee and delegating things to Andy?
Funny enough, myself and Andy have been working together quite a lot in the last 2 years, which has been absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed that. He came and did some work for the UK tote. We raised £100 million and bought the UK tote.
I remember that, yeah.
And Andy came in and did a rebranding that was pretty breathtaking. I mean, staggering, considering that Andy obviously knows nothing about sport. I mean, he supports Spurs. And genuinely, over the 20 years we've sort of been best pals, I've had to pay him not to bet on any selection I make. He is all the time. And yet, with those two disabilities, he pulled out some absolute miracle work there. Again, we should give a shout out to John Dutton, who was part of that team, really helped us there. So that's been fantastic. Right now, I'm chairman of something called Total Performance Data, TPD, which Andy again is a shareholder in, along with Dave Eastman, another ex-H.com.
Oh, right. Yeah, Eastman.
Absolute total legend. And that company is a world leader, he says, and this time is actually true, in GPS tracking of racehorses, providing sectional timing. We just completed a fundraise on that, which we all know how much fun that is. Yeah. But this is absolutely booming, got a good presence in North America. And then lastly, I'm working with another guy called John Dutton and Andy Hobsbawm. Again, it's a small world, but come back around.
Oh, yeah, these guys just seem to be coming at you all of it every time, right?
A thing called Greenbridge, and Greenbridge is a sort of an eco project that will make us absolutely no money whatsoever, but hopefully will make the world a little bit better. So with that, I'll pass on to Andy. I still want to answer your question about the IPO, Carl.
Yeah.
Well, I'd just like to point out, I stayed with agency.com through the highs and the lows till about 2008. So it's like a 15-year journey in total.
I didn't realize you stayed till 2008.
Yeah, I just didn't want to somehow leave when it was down. And anyway, it felt like having 15 different jobs along the way. I co-founded this thing called Do the Green Thing, which is still going, which is like an environmental non-profit about creativity and inspiring behavior change. I co-founded an Internet of Things cloud platform, data platform called Everything, and that's still going. And
Great.
And the thing Tote with Eamonn, I'm just working with a startup I'm chairman of called Loops. That's kind of like a design feedback tool that's kind of pretty interesting, and doing some mentoring of different tech companies and doing some music to scratch an itch that none of the other stuff does.
Yeah, you've gotten back to the music. That's great. It's actually exciting to see.
Yeah,
that's amazing. So, sorry, go on, Andy. Keep going.
No, I was just going to say two things about John Dutton and David Eastman. One, John Dutton had very little to do with the Tote branding. I'd just like to point that out. And secondly, David Eastman, it was one of my finest interview moments. We talk about like hiring all these people. I interviewed Dave Eastman, and the chair I was on literally collapsed. It just exploded, disintegrated in the middle of this interview. And it was the most surreal thing. And Dave just kept a completely straight face. And somehow I got another chair, sat on it, and we carried on. The strangest interview moment I've ever had in my life. But I think I hired him just out of, partly the way he handled that situation was so fantastic. I thought this guy is going to be good in tight spots.
Andy, you remember you stopped the interview and came into my office and said, "You've got to come and meet this guy. He's unbelievable." I said, "Okay, yeah, what's his background?" And he said, "Well, he's been an actor." No, that's pretty much it. Well, any other commercial experience? None. And I was like, "What do you want me to do?" He said, "Just come and meet the guy." And now we would be, brothers and arms. We speak to him every week. And, he was about a year after leaving agency, he was running 1,000-person team for JWT.
That's right.
He came to us as a guy that had no career. And I remember, again, we're talking about drafting people in. We drafted him into a meeting with BA way too early. And like some horrible senior bigwig came down and he asked Eastman this question. And Easto just sort of paused. And he made this right on the edge joke. And I remember thinking, and the guy burst out laughing, absolutely loved it. Eastman nailed him. I think, wow, this guy's got genuine talent. But I think that's a sort of an interesting sort of metaphor description for the whole of our journeys at Online Magic and Agents.com, finding unusual talent, bringing it blossom. I think if I had to describe the business in any way, that for me would be the best description. You think of the amazing talent that came on in, and often from the most bizarre background.
Yeah.
How do they get going now? How does that work now? Everyone's got to have a degree. Everyone's got to have blah blah blah.
Yeah. And you're sort of nodding away there.
Well, I remember someone saying once, and it's a slightly cheesy expression, but I always really liked it, which is sort of anyone could be Superman if you give them the right telephone box. And I just thought that was kind of what we did. We just created these environments. People came in, and they still talk about it to this day. A lot of people, that was the Scott the other day. It's one of the best work experiences of their professional lives, and I think that was the most creative thing about helping start the company, really. Providing some space where all these people came in and then went off to do amazing things, and that's a privilege to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's evidenced by the sort of longevity of the relationships. And it was funny when you guys both popped on before we started the show today. It felt like, and in fact, Eamonn, you said, "Hey, next time we do this, we need to do it in person." It just felt like, oh yeah, there's those guys. Like, I don't know, the relationship is very much still there. So just to
one idea I've just had, Kyle, is we should do one where we have maybe 10, 12, all in, the boxes in the family, because it is. And I think you've both nailed it. I think that culture, that curiosity, even to this day, I would submit to you that any of your current, compadres in Eastman and whatever, they've not lost their curiosity. You guys obviously haven't either. So I think that was one of the genuine things. If you were curious and were willing to take that step, you were in, right? It was come on over, right?
I also remember one thing, because a lot of times I've talked about in the past interviews I've seen on the show about, there being no rules and stuff. And I remember some of it feeling like common sense applied.
Yeah.
Yes.
The Apple ticketing thing, I just looked at a couple of things that were on the web and thought, well, it seems to make sense if you do it like that. And obviously that's really confusing. So people are not going to know how to do the transaction. And
yeah,
somehow I think there was some people who felt like they understood the medium enough to just be able to work it out using gut instinct.
Yeah.
And other people to whom it was just completely impenetrable. And it was kind of interesting time, wasn't it? You could actually figure out the answer just by your common sense to a new set of problems.
Well, I think you had to, right? You couldn't get a degree in it, right? So there was the problem, and so maybe it attracted people that had that curiosity and that skill to be able to sort of, figure out what sucks and don't do it.
Except for Eamonn, who had 50 levels.
Yeah, 50 levels notwithstanding. We did in London. There was a guy who was our first CTO, Jeremy Doig, who then went on to do amazing things at Google and ran YouTube engineering and was just an absolute rock star. And he'd come with a bunch of other people from the Multimedia Corporation, which was a BBC outfit doing CD-ROMs and things. So early doors, we did actually have some good interface UI skills from people who'd done CD-ROMs and interactive design. And I remember I learned a lot from just their basic rules of like what made good interaction. It's just that obviously on the web that changed things a bit.
Well, gents, we could go on for another 2 hours. I know
we'll have
Chan is typing away, so I know he's highly engaged. So Chan, thank you so much for bringing these amazing individuals together. And I'm glad that you were able to listen to Eamonn and Andy here today. Kyle, anything to end with?
No, just it's great to see you both, and thank
So
you
good.
for sharing yourself. We'll definitely have to have you back. Yeah, I think we'll do a big party version of.
I think we should.
But it's great to see you both, and thank you for sharing and being here. Really appreciate it.
We should track down Magnani and Caruso as well while we're at it. Right?
Absolutely.
Superb. Gents, have a great afternoon. Thank you so much. Chan, thank you for tuning in. Larkham, thank you for tuning in. Great to see your name. And Kyle, I'll see you on Friday, if not before.
Friday. We'll be back with Ben Jones next week from
Excellent.
Google's.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, Jen.
You need to have, at the end of the show, you need to have something like, let's do it to them before they do it to us. We just need to work.
Yeah, we got to button up the ending. We got the.
Yeah, I think we're right. Goodbye.
It's early days, Andy. So
yeah, fair enough.
We'll get there.
You got time.
Cheers.
Cheers, chum. Bye.
Bye.